Welcome to your very first video on arrays. In this one, you're going to learn the basic syntax for creating an array, a list of items, and we're going to figure out how we can interact with those array items, like reading their values, for example. Now, this section is going to work slightly differently than any of the sections we've had so far. In all of the previous sections, we've pretty much created a new file for every single video. We learned a new feature, and then in the next video, we created a new file and built up from scratch, learning a new feature. What we're going to focus on in this section, though, is creating just a few files and building up a more complex script. So once we bring arrays into the mix, we're going to have the fundamentals of the language down, which means that we'll be able to do more interesting things. So here's how this one's going to go. As we go through the videos, we're still going to learn new features. For that, we're going to focus on building a note-taking application. So in the first part of the video, as we explore a new topic, I'll be showing you in the context of a note-taking app. For the challenges, you're going to be focusing on creating a different application, a to-do application. And then at the very end, we'll have both of those apps, and the final section challenge will be creating a version of the expense manager that uses arrays. So we can actually track individual expenses and give them things like descriptions and amounts. Now, all of this is going to work a little differently than what we've seen in the past, but as always, we're going to work through everything in the video. There's no boilerplate code. We don't do anything outside of these videos. So if you watch and follow along with all of the challenges, you're going to be able to get through this one just fine. And you're going to be able to see how JavaScript can actually help us build applications. Over in the root of the folder, I'm going to make a new directory called arrays. And in here, we're going to add a couple of files. The first one is going to be called notes.js. This is where we'll build out a little note-taking script. And the second file that we're going to create is going to be called todo.js. And once again, for the moment, neither of these are going to be wired up to a user interface. It's just a script that runs. Later on, we'll wire up both of these to the browser so we can actually interact with it. All right, let's go ahead and also switch in the terminal to that folder, cd:/arrays. And now, as promised, we are going to work in the note-taking application file, and then at the end, your challenge will be over in the to-do file. Let's kick things off by creating our very first array. I'm going to define a constant notes for this one, and I'll set notes equal to my array. To create an array, we use these square brackets on your keyboard. That's these guys right here. And there we have it. We have an array. We have this list. It just has no items inside of it. If we want to add items, there are two ways we can do that. We can add items right here, right now, and we can also use various array methods, which we'll explore later in this section, to add items down below. Let's go ahead and initialize this array with some values, though. So we're going to type some stuff right in here. The individual items for your array can be anything. It could be a string, a number, a boolean, an object, a function, another array, but we'll stick with these simpler data types for the moment. So let's say for the notes, we have a list of strings, where each string represents that note's text. To add the first string, all we do is we create a string right here in those curly brackets. If I wanted to add a number, I'd type the number. If I wanted to add a boolean, I'd type a boolean. In this case, though, we do want a string to be the first item, so I'll create a string, and I'll type my note text. I'll call this one note1. Now we have an array with a single item in the list, but we can add as many as we want. We could have 0 if that's what made sense. We could have 1,000 if that's what our application required. Let's go ahead and add a couple more into the mix right here. To add another item, we add a comma after the previous item, then a space, then the other item. So it could be a number, a boolean, or any other type. There is no need to have all of your array items be of the same type, although usually that makes sense. So right here, we will add another note, another string with the text note2, and for good measure, we'll just add one last one, note3. So there we have it. We have an array, a list with 3 items inside of it, and now we can start doing things with this notes variable. Let's go ahead and start by just dumping it to the console. That would be console.log notes. I'm going to save the file and run things from the terminal. Over here, node notes is going to result in us seeing our list. We have our list, and we have our 3 items, note 1, note 2, and note 3. Now, there are a lot of interesting things we can do with arrays, and that's what we're going to spend most of this section covering. One of the most basic things is to figure out how many items are in your array. To do this, we use the length property much like we do for a string. So if I want to figure out how many items I have, I can go ahead and use notes.length. Now, there are plenty of methods available to us. Length, though, is a property, so we don't actually call it as a function. We just access it like this, and we get the length back as a number. So in this case, I have 3 items. I would expect to see 3. Over here, that's exactly what we get. Before we go any further, as always, I want to make you aware of where you can find the documentation for all of this, so you can take your knowledge to the next level and use all sorts of different interesting methods. If you search for MDN array, we should get to the right place. Right here, we're looking for the array JavaScript page. And over here, we can see all of the various properties and methods we have available to us. Now, arrays are a method-heavy data type. So as you can see, we do have the length property. It's pretty much the only one we'll ever use. Down below, though, we have an extensive list of methods. That's because methods are so essential to working with arrays, and arrays are so essential to building meaningful programs. So there's a lot of different functionality built into this. For example, we can sort an array, listing the items in alphabetical order. We could pull out the first 2 items and delete the rest. There are all sorts of things we can do, and we'll explore all of those in time. For the moment, though, let's go ahead and switch back over to the terminal and Visual Studio Code, and we're going to figure out how we can grab an individual item from the list. This is done via bracket notation. It's what allows us to grab an individual item from the list, and we grab it by its position. So let's say we want to grab the first item in the list and do something with that string. How do we get that done? Well, we start by referencing the array notes, and then we use bracket notation, which requires us to create some brackets. We open and close brackets right here after the array. Now, what goes inside of here is not more array items. It's actually a number. It's the position of the item we want to access. This is known as the index. The index is nothing more than the order the item comes in the array. Now, it's important to note that indexes start at 0 for arrays, and this isn't specific to JavaScript. You're going to see this with pretty much any programming language you use, which means that this would be the 0, this would be the 1, and this would be the 2. So everything is just off by 1. If I wanted to grab the first item right inside of these square brackets, I would type 0. Now let's go ahead and actually see if we get the string back by wrapping this in parentheses and tossing a console.log up front. I'm going to save the file and rerun things from the terminal. Right here, what do I get? I get note 1 printing. So now I have access to that string and I could do something meaningful with it. We can also grab any of the other items by their index. For example, if I want that last item, the 3rd item in the list, I would access it by its index, which is 2. I save things and rerun it, and I should get note 3. Now, if you access an item by its index and it doesn't exist, you're just going to get undefined back. As an example, let's say we try to grab an item with the index of 22, which clearly doesn't exist. If we rerun things, the script doesn't fail with some sort of error message. It just gives us back undefined, like we've seen in other situations. For example, an argument whose value was never provided. We can also access items starting at the end of the list, and to do this, we just perform a little calculation right here inside of these square brackets. We start off by grabbing the length, so notes.length. Now what's going to come back? 3 is going to come back. Does the index of 3 exist? No, because this is 0, this is 1, and this is 2. So 3 would account for the next item in the list. So if I wanted to grab the last item, all I do is subtract 1. Now we have a way to always get the last item from the list, and if we rerun things, we get note 3, and if I wanted to grab the second to last item, I could just do this. I could subtract 2 instead. If I rerun things, what do I get? I get note 2. So this is just the very basics of working with arrays. To wrap up this video, I'd like you to go ahead and use an array over here in the to-do file. What you're going to do is create an array of to-dos. So each one is just going to be a string describing what you need to do. That means you're going to create an array with 5 different to-dos. So go ahead and come up with 5 things you got to do, or 5 things just in general if your to-do list is pretty empty. Then you're going to print a little message that includes the length. So say something like you have X to-dos, where X is the actual length of the array. So you're going to want to use that length property. Then you're going to print the first and second to last items to the terminal. So you're going to go ahead and actually just print out the string for each of these. And if you want, you can give them a little bit of formatting. So you could say something like to do, colon, space, followed by the actual to do text, like walk the dog, for example. So take some time to knock all of this out. Go ahead and actually run your work once it's done and make sure you see the correct results over in the terminal. Take a quick moment to pause the video. When you're done, come back and click play, and we'll move through things together. All right, how'd that go? Let's go ahead and kick things off by creating our to-do list. Const to-dos equals a new array using our square brackets, and I'm going to add a few items inside. Right here, I will add order cat food. Then I'll have another one, clean kitchen. I'll add a few more, buy food, do work, and then the last one could be something like exercise. Pretty good list right there. Now we have our 5 items. Let's go ahead and print our first message telling us how many to-dos we have. For that, you needed to use the length property. So I'm going to use console.log to create a template string. Some parts are static, one part is dynamic. You have something to-dos. The something, which goes right here between 2 spaces, is the length property. So $ curly braces to inject a value. What do we want to put in there? To-dos dot length. Excellent. Now that we have our first message printing, we want to print a little message for the first to-do and the second to last one. I'll add that right down below. We can do all of this right inside of a template string if we wanted to, or we could have created a variable and referenced that. The choice really is yours. I'm going to go ahead and do all of this in one line just so we can see what that would look like. Right here, I'll start it off with to-do, colon space, and the first one. So I'm going to inject. I'm going to access the to-dos array. I'm going to use bracket notation to grab one of the items by its index. In this case, I want the first one with an index of 0. Then I can go ahead and take this line, copy it to the clipboard, paste it down below, and just tweak it to grab the second to last item. For that, we want to take the length into account. So to-dos dot length -1 gets us the last item, -2 gets us the second to last item. So hopefully I see order cat food and do work right here. Let's go ahead and run the script and see what we get. I'll clear the terminal output and run node to-do.js. What do I get? I get you have 5 to-dos. I get the first one, order cat food, and the second to last one, do work. So there we have it. We know the basics of creating and reading from arrays. In the next video, we're going to continue working with our arrays, so stay tuned, and I'll see you then.